Welcome to the Big Game Hunting Podcast, where we help hunters like you prepare for the big game hunting adventures you've always dreamed of. Now, here's your host, John McAdams.
Hi there, John McAdams here. Welcome to episode 331 of the Big Game Hunting Podcast. Joe Thompson is up next in my ongoing Africa hunting mini-series to talk about his hair-raising leopard hunt in Zimbabwe last year. As you will learn here shortly, there was a lot of drama associated with this hunt, especially at the very beginning. Now, as Ferris Bueller once said, life comes at you pretty fast. That is exactly what happened to Joe on this leopard hunt. We have a fantastic episode today. You are going to love it. Before we get started, I have just one admin note for you. I have one opening remaining for a hunt in Africa, 4 to 13 November 2024. I have slashed prices for those dates. You can hunt for 7, 8, or 10 days within that time frame. You can hunt plains game, buffalo. You can hunt both then if you would like. Those dates are right at the end of the dry season, and the hunting is fantastic then, especially for kudu. In fact, we almost always take our biggest kudu of the year in September, October, and November. So if you did not draw a tag anywhere this year, or if you just otherwise have an opening in your schedule during November, this is a great opportunity to enjoy an African safari at a discount. Email me, john@thebiggamehuntingblog.com, and I would be happy to discuss things in more detail with you. Okay, let's get started talking to Joe about this hair-raising leopard hunt. Well, good morning, Joe. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Good morning, John. Thank you very much.
I have to ask you the question I always ask people. How did you find the Big Game Hunting Podcast?
Scrolling one night on my smart TV, YouTube. I think I was looking for leopard hunts or leopard hunting podcast and discovered your episode with Dr. Robertson.
And so am I correct in assuming that this happened right after you booked your leopard hunt and you were looking for information to help you prepare and hopefully be entertained a little bit while you did that?
It was somewhat after. It was not right after I booked. It was more right before I went.
Okay, good deal. Well, you and I have exchanged a number of emails over the last few months after you got back from your trip and whatnot, especially after my episode with Phil Macero earlier this year. And it was very interesting hearing about that story because it was a good story about a hunt that really begins before the hunt starts. And so if I recall correctly, you were booked to hunt September 2023 in Zimbabwe for leopard. And as it always is, right, you're getting ready to leave town, getting everything straightened out with work for an extended absence, getting everything ready with your family, all that. Even in the best of times, everything goes right. It is stressful and there's a lot going on. And so you dealt with that, but you also had to deal with some additional drama with that too. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the stuff that happened before your hunt even began, before you even left home?
Absolutely. Getting down to the final details, I go to the medical clinic to get my anti-malaria meds, and feeling fine at this point. Get the meds that I was after. That night, I discover that my throat is sore. So I think the next day I went to work but felt terrible. And then the day after that, went back to the clinic and tested positive for COVID with like 9 days before my trip was set to begin.
Oh, geez, man. Yeah, that's, it's never fun getting sick, but it always seems like it has a tendency to happen at the worst possible time, right? When you're trying to get ready to leave town. So what ended up happening with that?
Well, I explained I was leaving the country and, I felt like I couldn't get my money back, and I'd already postponed the trip one time before, and I just told her I really, really, really needed to get on the plane, and she prescribed me a regimen of about 11 and a half pills, and that was new to me. I'm not a big pill taker, but I did everything she said to do, and I'm telling you, probably 48 hours before I was set to leave, I tested negative, was able to go to work. I think the day before I left, clean up some stuff, and then Friday, I got on a plane.
What was the travel like getting from the United States to Zimbabwe for this hunt?
I like the direct flight to Johannesburg. I've done United and Delta. This time I went Delta, to me, it works out best for me because it's less travel time. So basically, Jackson, Mississippi to Atlanta, Atlanta to Johannesburg, overnight at City Lodge. I've done that a number of times. And then take a little jumper, an air link to Harare is what I did this particular trip. And then you've got what I call the 5-hour prayer from Harare to Makudi. That's the road transfer. And of course, everything's in kilometers and you're on the wrong side of the road. And it's very scary.
I mean, all those former British colonies that just do everything backwards. The driver's on the other side of the car. You drive on the wrong side of the road. It's just weird and different.
I say that if you survive that road transfer, the bush is nothing. You've got the bush covered.
And so you were there in September, late in the dry season, like that. Tell us about what the bush looked like when you were there, how the animals were looking. What was the weather like?
I've never hunted Africa in September before. It was very, very, very hot. And it was very, very, very dry. And that did affect the animals. Now, you've got to understand where I went, Makudi, it is not known as a plains game area. It is known as a buffalo area. It is known as a leopard area. And I went in there with reasonable expectations. I knew there was not going to be a kudu, a sable behind every bush. So, I was prepared for the lack of plains game. But I was not prepared for how hot it was and how dry it was in September.
What sort of temperatures were you dealing with when you were there?
I can't even remember, John, but it was hot. It really was. But I was in really, really good shape before I got COVID. Like, it's hot in Alabama in September and in August. And I'd been coming home on my lunch break and hiking, 6 miles in the mid 90-degree weather here. So until I got COVID and had to take 2 weeks off, I was in really good shape.
Yeah. And so that is a rough deal to lose all those gains like that. I remember you detailing in your hunting report about how you were losing weight and how you were getting in shape and everything. And so you kind of limp into this hunt, just barely recovered from COVID, and you haven't been doing a lot of real physical activity. And then you get there and it's really, really hot. Now, with it being super dry like that, probably very few leaves on the trees, but also a lot of dead, crackly leaves on the ground too, as well, right?
That's true. And my shoes were very, very, very loud. Like, I remember that about the shoes that I took. I felt like every time I would step on a leaf that the pH would just tear a hole through me. And another thing I need to mention is, after all those meds, like, and that Melleron in particular, like, I really felt like it was like I was like out of it mentally when I got there, if that makes sense. Like I could tell like medicine head or something was going on, and it took probably half the trip for that to subside.
Yeah, and then you add all of the jet lag and all that baloney onto it as well, and it just makes it even worse. But you have a long trip to get there, all the drama ahead of time, but you're finally there. You're in Makudi. You're getting ready to hunt leopard. How did things actually go on the hunt? Were you getting to shoot your own bait and help with that sort of thing? Were they pre-baiting? Tell us a little bit about that.
That's a great question. With my job and with my family, 10 days is all I can do, particularly when you have 2 travel days to get there, 2 travel days to get home. So normally a leopard hunt is 15 days. Well, what I had to do was basically compress a 15-day hunt into 10 days. Now, I had to pay for a 15-day hunt. However, they did okay it to where I could come for 10 days. And so because of that, I went ahead and pre-baited. I had the PH pre-bait for me. And when I got there, there were, I think, 6 baits swinging, but none of them had been hit at that point.
What kind of animals were they using for bait?
This is an interesting story. In a safari area, you cannot bait with donkeys or goats. You have to use game animals. Well, it was really, really, really dry, and, game was not everywhere. So the PH had to get creative. But my answer is they were baiting with impala, and also the hunter before me had killed a remarkable buffalo and a remarkable eland. And they also had, I know at least the buffalo was used for bait, and then impala.
So you get there, there's some buffalo bait, some impala, already hanging, 6 baits, but none of them had actually been hit yet. Once you get there, I assume you go to the range, check your rifles, all that sort of thing. How does the actual hunt progress for you after that?
So absolutely, we check the rifles the first morning, and then we go hang a bait. We hang a bait, and like I wrote in my report, I always get a little nervous when dangerous game hunting. And most of the time it's, this is dangerous. I'm a father. I have small children. I've got a 4-year-old son. But this was different. I remember where they were hanging the bait, the limb it would not have been an easy shot. It was not kind of broadside. It was more angled. And then where the PH was talking about building the blind, I remember thinking to myself, wow, this shot's no gimme. So I got a little nervous there. And let me see, we hung that bait. We went to check another bait that was hung. And then we drove to a different area to try to find some plains game, a sable or something. And that was pretty much the end of day one, except they moved the bait from a spot where it was to a new spot on a dry riverbed. And that was the end of day one.
And what about the next couple days?
So day 2, we get up, and the night before I'd questioned the PHs about, and I had 2 PHs. It was fantastic. And one of them is just absolutely a cat expert, both of them really in retrospect, looking back. So I'm questioning them about what kind of expect, because I had spoken with a guy who had just hunted in Macoute, coincidentally from Alabama also. And he's like, the leopard are plentiful. We've got X number of toms on bait. Like I've never seen anything like it. There's basically leopard everywhere. So I'm questioning the PHs, should there be cats on bait at this point? They're like, no, not at all. It's still too early. We feel really good about it, but it's just too early at this point. Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay. So wake up the next morning, and I really wanted a sable. So we go to an area where a sable had been seen, a big bull. And sure enough, we pull off the main road, and then you hear the glorious tap, tap, tap on the hood, and then the PH is talking with the trackers, and you can't understand the language, and you're trying to be respectful and not ask, what are you talking about, even though it's killing you. So I think they do it on purpose. But anyhow, I let them get through talking. And I'm like, what's up? He's like, they've seen a group of sable cows. I'm like, fantastic. Is there a bull? And he's like, they don't see one, but let's follow them. So we follow. There's a bull track that they can see, and I think they follow for like 7 kilometers, and it's clear they're being followed. Like, we cannot catch them. We're not gaining on them. So we're basically in the vicinity of a leopard bait. And basically the PH is like, I don't think it's been hit, but I'm going to go check just because we're in the area. So I'm sitting in the cruiser, like just eating a snack out of my backpack and totally oblivious to everything that's going on. And my cameraman, Vaughn Foslu, who was fantastic, by the way, he says, basically, they've seen something. I'm like, how can you tell? He's like, I can see it on their faces. So the PH has the SD card. He puts it in his phone, and he's like, yeah, a big tom has fed. Said he fed at 2 a.m. He came back at 6 a.m., and he'll be back this afternoon before dark. And I'm like, whoa, what are we going to do? And he's like, well, I didn't expect him to be here so early. I'm very familiar with this cat. I've set for him many times. 4 other PHs have tried for him. We're not going back to get everything that we need. We're not going back to get the leopard follow-up kit. We're not going back to get the blind chairs. We're sitting in this blind this afternoon.
Ooh,
okay.
Man. Now it got real. Jeez.
Right. He's like, do you have a flashlight? And I had a flashlight, but it was terrible. Of course, I didn't tell him it was terrible because I wanted to see it. I'm like, yeah, I got a flashlight. So I was like, good. So we went to a dry riverbed, found some shade, had lunch, and he tells me, where to aim. And shows me on his phone, pulls up various pictures and shows me where to aim. And I told him I could aim there.
Mm-hmm. That is so interesting that Leopard starts hitting this bait and he's like, okay, we're doing this. About how far from the main camp are you at this point that makes it far enough that he doesn't want to go back?
That's kind of one of the good things about hunting Makudi is the drives are not terribly long, but we're as far away from the camp as we could be in the concession. Mm-hmm. It's probably a solid 45-minute drive to get back there. Then you got to turn around, come back. So luckily they had, and I've never even heard of this happening, is they had already pre-built a blind on this bait. And the reason they did that, I understand, is because this cat was very educated. Mm-hmm. So they went ahead when they hung the bait, pre-built the blind, thankfully. So basically all we had to do was walk in. I think we climbed in at like 2:45 p.m.
And so about how far was the blind from the bait?
55 yards.
And we haven't talked about your guns yet at this point, so let's hit pause and tell us about the rifle that you have with you that you're planning on using on this Leopard.
Okay, I took 2 rifles, but the one that I took for Leopard / Plains game was a Model 70 New Haven gun, built in probably 96, I think. It was a classic synthetic matte. I had put a Macmillan stock on it with my length of pull, and I had also put Tally quick release mounts on it with a Swarovski Z6i.
You said it was a 375?
375 H&H.
And what kind of ammo were you using?
Ammo was something that I thought long and hard about. I kind of wanted to shoot the cat with partitions, mm-hmm. but I had it sighted in for bear claws, and I'm a huge believer in bear claws, particularly when hunting buffalo. Basically, my PH and I had been talking via WhatsApp, and he's like, if you're sighted in for bear claws, just bring bear claws. Mm-hmm. And I was like, not a bad plan. And I had shot like extensively with bear claws. Like I knew exactly where I was hitting. So, I felt comfortable doing that, particularly since I had enough guns, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely. And so you have this pre-built blind that's already set up 55 yards away. You have you have a rifle with a really nice low light scope on it with that Swaro Z6 loaded with 300 grain trophy bonded bear claw bullets. So you said you didn't have chairs for the blind. What did you guys do actually in the blind when you set up?
On the cruiser, he had some camp chairs. In other words, when you have lunch, oftentimes in the bush, they'll pull these chairs out, and those are the chairs that you sit in. Being in the States, I can equate it to camping chairs or the chairs that you take to a softball game when your daughter's playing softball. Mm-hmm. The foldable camping chairs.
In terms of what is legal in this area, are you allowed to use an artificial light, or do you have to stop hunting when there's no more natural light, or 30 minutes after sunset?
Yes, in a safari area like we were in, it's the same rules as deer hunting in Alabama. 30 minutes before sunrise is when legal time starts, and 30 minutes after sunset is when legal time stops. So no artificial lights, no thermals. It is strictly straight up Alabama deer hunting in a shooting house over a food plot.
And you're dealing with an animal that is similar in size to a whitetail, but a whole lot more dangerous and a whole lot more complicated. But you also have to deal with the similar situation that especially those, just like those old bucks, those old wise tomcats that have been hunted before. You have to get them to come out during daylight hours when you can legally see them or practically see them and legally shoot them as well. And so if it comes out 5 minutes too late, can't shoot it. So that's what we're dealing with here. So tell us what happens next.
Well, we get in the blind, and my chair is just absolutely terrible. Like the gun is on a sandbag. Like there should be no easier shot in hunting. Mm-hmm. Absolutely no easier shot. I mean, your gun's on a sandbag. It's right on the bait. The PH basically positions me in shooting position and tells me not to move. And every time I move, my chair just creaks and squeaks. And, it's just awful. But, I sit as still as I can and just try not to make any noise. I mean, I felt like my kids, like I do them when they're in the shooting house when we're deer hunting. Like if they make a noise, I just, admonish them or whatnot.
Be quiet.
But yeah, I mean, the shoe was definitely on the other foot, and I was basically in prone position from 2:45 to 5:45.
Gosh.
And sure enough, I mean, it's just like you read about in the books. Like you hear the baboons just start raising a ruckus. And you're sitting there thinking, this is too good to be true. This is too good to be true. There's no way this is happening on my first sit, because you've heard what Boddington's written. It takes 80 hours before you see a leopard or whatnot. So, you're just thinking this can't be happening. And then, that would be over to the right. And then behind the bait, the noise has moved. Now you hear Franklin in distress almost calling. And the next thing you know, it's just bam. I mean, he's there, like on the limb, over the bait, staring at the blind with yellow eyes. And you just absolutely can't believe what you're looking at.
Jeez. It's getting darker and darker, and you get later in the day, and you hear all the ruckus from the baboons and all the other animals, and all of a sudden this leopard is there on the tree. You're looking through the scope. Boom, he's there. It's the right cat. Continue with your story.
And it's the most magnificent leopard I could ever imagine. Like, it's the most beautiful animal that you ever seen. And of course they hang the bait where they don't make it easy for the animal. They have to make it a little more difficult to distract him. And, he's like tearing at the bait with his claws, sticking his head in, and you're just sitting there waiting. And a leopard will do things to you that you've never had an animal do. It's like Capstick wrote, and I'm going to read here. It says, the easiest shot you will ever have on safari, if your professional knows his apples on Ingwe, will be at your leopard. It is also the shot you will most likely to blow. Leopards do strange things to the nicest folks. Look at it this way. Any damn fool can sink a 2-foot putt for a nickel. But let that 2 feet represent the United States Open Championship and a hefty stack of $1,000 bills, and you have a different proposition. People who can shoot the eye out of a downwind Tetsie offhand at 500 yards far too often completely miss or worse wound stationary leopards at 40 yards. And I certainly can't say it any better than that.
Yes, definitely. I've never hunted leopard before, but I can certainly understand the pressure. I mean, it's nerve-wracking just listening to some of these stories I hear about with leopard hunts sometimes, never mind actually being there. But you're 55 yards away. You got a nice, steady shooting rest.
Right.
It should be a piece of cake.
Yeah. Absolutely, it should be a piece of cake. And then you've got the financial aspect of it also. It's not like an elephant where if you miss the brain, then you can get a heart shot when he's running away. Mm-hmm. You've got one shot at a leopard, and if you get blood off of him, I mean, you're buying your daughter a used Toyota nearby by the time you get home, because you got to pay the trophy fee if you get blood. Mm-hmm. So, that was weighing heavily on me. Like, by golly, either miss or kill. Mm-hmm. There is no in between.
Well, so what happens next?
So the PH is telling me to wait till he stands. And I know that we are getting close to that 30-minute post-sunset window. Like, I know we're within 120 seconds of that. I'm wanting everything to be completely legal, completely right. There's a government scout there. And basically, I was wanting to shoot the cat when he was not standing. And they were discouraging me, thankfully, basically telling me, no, don't do that. So, I mean, I'm sitting on go, my red dot's on, and I mean, as soon as he stands, boom, I pull the trigger. And you have to understand, like, the leopard did to me what he should do to everybody. Like, I was shaken up, no doubt about it. Like, he had me shaken up. but I was able, after all those minutes, to calm myself down before I fired. But I did experience, everything that leopard hunting is before I was able to calm myself down.
Do you have an estimate of how long you saw the leopard before you actually shot?
I do. I mean, I had a cameraman there the whole time. It was probably, it was over 2 minutes, 2 to 5 minutes.
Okay. And so he gets up there, and you're just, at this point, is this a process where over the course of those couple of minutes, the PH is identifying the cat, making sure it's the right one, and then it's just a matter of waiting for him to give you the right shot opportunity?
Absolutely. He's got to make sure it's a male, and he's got to make sure it's of age, and then he's got to get in shooting position. So that takes time.
And so what happens after you fire?
Well, I shoot, and I'm fully expecting the cat to be dead at the base of the tree. And he's not, and PH is like, what happened? I'm like, I don't know. And then we hear some movement over to the left, and then we hear some growling, and nothing is making sense to me, because it's such an easy shot. It's a chip shot. And he's like, I guess we're going to have to go look, and I'm thinking that the cat's going to be dead, but then I've heard the growling, and I just really hadn't put it together in my head what happened. So he gets my flashlight that sucks, and he disappears, and he comes back and he's like, man, you got 2 small drops of blood at the base of the tree. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I shot a bear claw, it went through the cat like a solid. He's not bleeding. And he's like, man, I think you hit him low. I think you might have clipped the lungs, but I think you got him real low, and we're going to come back in the morning. I'm like, what do you mean we're going to come back in the morning? He's like, we're going to come back in the morning. I was like, yes, sir. So we get in the cruiser and drive back, and just really uncomfortable riding. Listen, I love the PH. I love him. Great friend of mine, legendary PH. I would hunt with him again in a minute. But you have to understand there's 2 differences of opinion in what happened. I feel like he hasn't found the cat in the dark, and he feels like the cat's going to be very much alive.
Mm-hmm.
So we take the long, uncomfortable ride back to camp. He tells the other PHs in camp what happened. He kind of briefs them, and I'm being really quiet. And I ask him, I say, let's suppose we find the cat tomorrow, and he's been eaten by hyenas. And I think the light bulb kind of went off in his head at that point. And he realized that I think the cat's dead. He thinks the cat's alive. And he looks at me. There were 5 people at the dining table. He said, I'm telling you, Joe, if we find your cat tomorrow and he's been eaten by hyenas, you and I'll get together on the trophy fee. And that's all I needed to hear. At that point, I felt like I'd shot a half-price leopard.
And I'll bet you slept like a baby that night, didn't you?
I did. I'm telling you, I went to my tent. I thought to myself, I've shot a half-price leopard. I was knowledgeable enough to know that there's people in the Middle East and people in Israel who can recreate a leopard out of 100% synthetics. And I'm telling you, I slept like a baby. And we get up the next morning, and 3 cruisers and 3 PHs. He tells me to wait at the blind. And I say, yes, sir, no problem. And that reminds me of another quote from Eric Rundgren. And this is his first leopard mauling. Of course, Eric was a professional hunter. And basically what he says is, anyone who manages only to wound the leopard when he is perched on a branch in plain view is almost certain to miss him if he is charging zigzag and thick cover. So I'm thinking to myself, my PH basically has no confidence in me because I hadn't rendered a cat dead at the base of a tree 55 yards away, and I get that.
Mm-hmm.
So he tells me to wait at the blind, and I do. And I'm kind of watching them go to the bait tree, and I mean, soon as they like get to the bait tree, a hyena skirts to the left, and I'm thinking, this is fantastic, So, I mean, it's not very long at all before, and my hunting partner was with me because his PH was there to help them in the recovery. So, the PHs clearly think there's going to be a charge. They think they're going to be mauled. And, I'm just hopeful that they're going to find my cat. And I could never imagine that the cat would be found in pristine condition, especially after the hyena. I'm thinking that there's going to be, just shards of the cat left. So it's about 6:20 in the morning, I think, when they start tracking the cat. And probably about 20 minutes later, we hear talking. And my hunting partner looks at me and says, well, that's a good sign. And, I don't say anything. I'm trying to figure out what in the world's going on. And we hear laughing. And he says, that's a really good sign. And just after the laughing, we hear a gunshot. Boom. And I'm as confused as ever. Like I have absolutely no idea what's going on, but I'm thinking to myself, well, this is good because they've shot the leopard.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm worried, did they blow his head off with the buckshot? Is my mount going to be ruined? And not long after that, I think the government scout and the driver come get me and show me down the hill, and climb down the hill, and everybody's smiling and laughing, and then he tells me, we found him, we found him. And I said, did you shoot him? And he said, no, I shot at a tree just to let you know we found him. And I was like, how much damage does he have? And Brian Van Blurt, the other PH, says, you might have enough for a hat band. And, my heart just sunk at that point. And then I could tell, like, by looking at his face that he was joking. And he tells me he's joking. And Teeny tells me, he's like, no, man, we found him. He's perfect. He doesn't have a scratch on him. He's a beautiful leopard. And, the trackers had carried him to the cruiser, and then he calls for him to bring the cat back down to the riverbed. And we just took some beautiful pictures, probably spent an hour in the riverbed taking daytime pictures that we couldn't have taken had he been found the night before.
Mm-hmm. So about how far did that leopard end up going?
The only thing I know is I could hear them talking. They were kind of behind the bait, and I could hear them talking and laughing. And it took them about 20 minutes to find him. So, I really don't know how far he went, but they tell me he was somewhat difficult to find. And another thing I failed to mention is I did hit the cat further back than I wanted, but I got the lungs.
And so was that just a function of the angle that he was at? I know sometimes, especially in that fading light, the leopard, it can be kind of hard to tell, how steeply he's quartering and whatnot, or did you hit where you were aiming and it just turned out to be a little bit further back than you wanted?
What I think happened was this. Teeny had given me a mnemonic for how to find the right spot. And basically he tells me, come up the back of the front leg, 1 inch below the center line of the cat.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what I did. But what I think happened after reviewing the video is when I shot, the cat wasn't fully erect. In other words, his front legs weren't 90 degrees from the limb. I think that, it was at an angle. And when I went up the leg, it put it further back than it should have been.
And so you think you probably clipped the back of both lungs and maybe got his liver too?
I did not hear them say anything about liver, but when they field dressed the cat, they saw where the bullet had actually, as you say, clipped the back of the lungs.
Mm-hmm. And so I'll bet the demeanor in atmosphere in camp at this point was very different than it was the night before, though, wasn't it?
It really was, because you have to understand, you've got two different people thinking two very different bad things. Teeny thinking that he's about to get mauled,
mm-hmm.
and me thinking we're about to find a leopard eating by hyenas. So, you get the cat. And another thing that I need to say is this, and I cannot explain this. I have a theory, but I can't explain it. We wake up that morning, and in September in Africa, it's cool. It's like a fall day. It's overcast, and the whole way driving to Rio, Tinny's going, I've never seen weather like this. Like, look how overcast it is. It's not supposed to be like this. So the temperature was like really, really, really cool the whole way. Mm-hmm. And then you get in that river bottom and the temperature drops even more. So basically the cat was in full rigor when he was found. And at this point, because, I just refuse to believe that everything's going to end perfectly, I'm thinking, hair slippage. Mm-hmm. So the whole time they're taking pictures of me, I'm reaching down trying to pull hairs out of the cat, but none of them slipped.
Yeah, so that was a fortuitous course of events that it ended up being, especially in that exact spot, quite a bit cooler than it would have been otherwise. And so not only did you end up killing the leopard cleanly, and you didn't go that far, and nobody got hurt, and the hyenas didn't get him, but even after sitting out all night, he was still in pretty good shape too then.
Oh, absolutely. No slippage. So beautiful mount, hopefully.
Well, so speaking of taxidermy, what are you planning to do with it?
I'm going to get a full mount. And I need to say that was one of the reasons why I went ahead and booked a leopard hunt. Like, leopard had never really been on my radar, but it was very easy to get leopards imported in America. Not very easy, somewhat easy. Mm-hmm. And, I've never been one motivated by fear. I don't go out and buy toilet paper during a pandemic, or I don't run to the gas station and fill up 5-gallon cans of gasoline when the storm's coming. I've just never really been one motivated by fear, but I knew that getting a leopard into America was as easy probably as it ever has been. And I don't have a crystal ball that tells me what it's going to be like in the future. And it was very easy. I mean, I filled out the paperwork myself, mailed $100 to Virginia. Probably a month later, I get a permit, and 8 months from when my hunt ended, my leopard skin is at the taxidermist.
Perfect. So you got it dipped and shipped, and it's getting finished in the USA then?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so the hard part about that hard and that stressful part is behind you, and now it's just a matter of letting the taxidermist here finish and going to get it from him.
Or have it delivered, yes.
Yeah. Well, so looking back on things with this leopard hunt, it's interesting how it worked out like that, where things just seemed to go really fast on that hunt. You got there and it didn't seem like anything, like not that much was going on, and you're still kind of recovering from your illness, recovering from the jet lag and the travel and everything, and then boom, okay, we're hunting leopard right now tonight. That's got to do something to your psyche like that. And sometimes it takes a little while to get warmed up, so to speak, on a hunt, but instead you're kind of thrown into it like that. Was that, it seemed like that was a factor. Would you agree on that assessment?
The only thing I can really say about that, John, is that, like you say, you land, the first day is kind of slow, and then you're tracking sable, just hopeful that you'll get an opportunity at a bull. Next thing you know, you're hunting leopard. Next thing you know, you have made less than a perfect shot. You feel like you put your PH and his team's bodies at risk. And the next day you find the leopard in pristine condition, and we took the rest of the third day off. That was the day that we found the cat. And, it was just, I just couldn't believe that it had happened, particularly. I mean, I don't want to say it was easy, but I bet you I could book 20 more leopard hunts and they wouldn't be as easy as that one was.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting dynamic that goes on too, because do I understand correctly, you've never hunted with this particular PH before, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, so he doesn't know you that well. You don't know him. You haven't shot anything yet at this point either. It might be different if this would have happened on, say, day 7 of the hunt, and you had 3 or 4 animals under your belt, and you guys were comfortable with each other. He kind of knows what the deal is, and maybe at that point, if he's seen you make 3 or 4 perfect shots on animals, maybe that would have swayed his attitude a little bit. Maybe giving you a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt or something like that. Who knows? There's a lot of those things that could have changed it and maybe made the attitude a little bit different like that. But as it were, it ended up working out fine. And this is day 2 of the hunt. You say you took day 3 off. What happened for days 4 to 10 on this hunt? Without going into excruciating detail with this, but what was the rest of the hunt like?
Sure. Well, kind of my want list, if you will, for the hunt was leopard, buffalo, sable, and eland. Those were the animals that I really wanted. Now, when you're hunting wild Africa, you take what the bush gives you. Mm-hmm. Well, we had seen an impala around, but I had one larger, so we didn't shoot. And saw a warthog, and the warthog really wasn't on my radar. And so I think we're getting probably about day 5 or so, and you know, I don't think we hadn't seen the sable or the eland or the water buck. We had seen water buck, but they were within 400 meters of water, so that's illegal in a safari area. Mm-hmm. So basically, we're going to check for buffalo at a spot, and we hear the tap 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 on the roof. And at this point, you know, like I'd already turned down warthog, and So Teeny looks at me and says, you wouldn't want to shoot a 50-inch kudu, would you? And I thought it would send a good message, you know, that I wasn't tire kicking. Mm-hmm. So I was like, yeah, I'll shoot a 50-inch kudu. So we stopped the cruiser, and we kind of double back on the road, and we see the kudu, and he's standing like behind a tree with a crotch in it, and he's got like a thick wall of leaves over his vitals. And I'm on the sticks, and Teeny's telling me to wait. And I'm like, Teeny, I can kill him. I can shoot through those green leaves. And he's like, no, wait. I mean, I can shoot through those green leaves. He's like, well, if you can do it, do it. So boom, I pull the trigger, and just, you know, I hit him as well as he could have been hit. And he starts running up the hill and doubles back and kind of dives right in front of us. And I got the recovery on film, and anyhow, it was just a good moment, you know. So we take the kudu back and to the skinning shed, strike out on buffalo. I think the next day I shot a warthog. We were tracking some eland and shot a warthog. Just a really nice warthog, and just concentrated on buffalo the rest of the trip. And day 9 ends, and I haven't seen a buffalo at that point.
Did you end up getting a buffalo on this hunt?
I did. It's probably the best day in the field I've ever had in my life. Wake up day 10, and we had found on the late afternoon of day 9 where some Duggar boys had watered, but they were on kind of a water every other day pattern. So, you know, we took that as terrible news that they watered that afternoon and they wouldn't water again until after I left. So we drive to the area just praying, you know, that's the only thing we could do is pray that we would come across one or find some tracks or something. And we get to the end of the road and nothing. So Teeny, it's a crazy story. He turns the cruiser around, and he basically just starts kind of mumbling, talking to himself. And he drives probably another 250 yards, and he throws the cruiser in park. He gets out, doesn't say a word with his binoculars, leaves the door open, and about that time he comes running back, just wide open running, like a fullback back to the cruiser. He's like, I've seen 5 Duggar boys on the hillside. And we're like, what? He's like, load up, 5 Duggar boys on the hillside. So I get my .416 and I put a 4 shell in, and we go to the spot where Teeny had seen the buffalo. And sure enough, they're 1,000 yards away. And John, I'm telling you, the wind could not have been any worse. Like it was right at our backs, blowing from us to the buffalo. And Teeny just flips the switch. I'm telling you, he goes in PH mode, and he comes up with a masterful plan that takes us diagonally down the hill to the right, across a dry river. We come up the hill to the left, and he's stopping and he's glassing, he's stopping, he's glassing. And all of a sudden he puts the sticks up and says, there they are. And I'm telling you, 15 yards in front of me is a 1,800-pound Duggar boy. and I'm on the sticks, and he grabs the sticks and he moves up the hill. And I'm thinking, what is he doing? So I get on the sticks again. I'm 12 yards. And he reaches to grab the sticks again. I'm like, no, I'll shoot him from here. He's like, no, come with me. So he moves the sticks one more time. I'm 10 steps from this buffalo. And he says, put it right in the shoulder. And boom, I put it right in the shoulder. He goes down like a sack of rocks. And when he does that, another buffalo behind him throws his head up. So I rack another shell in, and he says, shoot that one. So he's quartering two, and I put it right in front of his shoulder, pull the trigger. He takes off, kind of hunches up, takes off. I rack another one in, put another one in him. And in less than 5 seconds, I've got 2 buffalo on the ground.
Holy
After
cow.
struggling all week on Duggar Boy.
And so you said it was about a 10-yard shot on the first one and a little bit farther for the second one?
15.
Yeah. And what ammo were you using in your 416?
400 grain bear claws.
You love those bear claws, and it seems like they worked well for you on this hunt.
No, it was unbelievable. Like I'm looking at it right now. It looks just like a bear claw should. Both of them.
And so, literally, last day of the hunt, you get shots on 2 great-looking buffalo, and boom, boom, they're down. And man, things have changed quite a bit over the course of just a few minutes, haven't they?
Absolutely. Like Teeny had already told me the night before. He said, "Look," he said, "you're the only buffalo hunter I've ever had to not kill a buffalo." And I was like, "Teeny, I hadn't seen a buffalo." And he's like, "I'll tell you what, if you can come back next year, I'll slash the daily rate." And I was like, "I can't come back next year." And he's like, and I was like, "What about 2025? He said, "Yeah." So I'm thinking, how am I going to break this to my wife that I'm going to come back,
Mm-hmm.
and we wake up that next morning and it just all falls into place beautifully.
This was not your first trip to Africa, but you had never killed a buffalo before this hunt, correct?
Correct. Yeah, that was my first time seeing a buffalo. Well, I take that back. I had seen buffalo on a previous trip inside a fence, but I had never seen a wild, unfenced buffalo.
Mm-hmm. And so, as it turned out on this hunt, you ended up going home with the leopard, with the kudu, and then with 2 buffalo, just like that, huh?
And a warthog.
Okay, very good. Did you end up shooting the warthog and the kudu with your 375 or your 416?
I did, 375.
Okay, yeah. And so, man, and what sort of scope did you have on your 416?
I've got a Zeiss 1x6 by 24.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you like those European scopes then?
I do.
Uh-huh. Well, and so you shoot this buffalo on day 10. What I'm assuming they are back in the States now at the same taxidermist as your leopard is then, right?
Absolutely. Everything came together. And that's what's so remarkable, I think, is I got warthog and leopard back within 8 months into the United States.
Man, it's nice when it works out like that, and there's minimal drama, especially with all the drama that your hunt started out with. So it seemed like you got a lot of the hard, stressful stuff out of the way early between being sick and then with the leopard at the beginning, and then I'm glad it got easier for you after that.
Yeah, I couldn't have written a better ending to the hunt. I really could not have. It's just absolutely remarkable that after struggling all week on Duggar Boys, that, like I said, within 5 seconds, I had shot 2 the last morning of the hunt. And we go back. Well, we've got a massive recovery effort, as you could imagine. But luckily, the PH who hunts the neighboring safari area needed line bait. Coincidentally, his hunter was from Alabama, and I know of the hunter. So that was a neat story that he shows up to help us with the buffalo for line bait for a guy that I know of, basically.
Good deal. Well, and so you ended up going home the next day, I presume, and then within a couple of days after that, you were back in Alabama and back at work and back in a normal life, huh?
100%. Yeah, and I can't say enough good things about Teeny. I mean, I had a 10-day abbreviated hunt, and I killed a leopard, a magnificent leopard, and 2 magnificent buffalo. And I don't know how it could have been any better. Like he provided a hunt that I will never forget.
Man, it sounds like it. It sounds like it. You were on an awesome hunt, and you are definitely making me excited to go back and hunt Africa myself. I love having these conversations. So you were saying that you could not go back to Africa in 2024. You were hunting in 2023. You said you couldn't go back the following year. Do you have plans to go back in the future? And if so, what are you thinking about?
Absolutely. I am booked for September 2026 in Metetsi 2. And there is roan, sable, eland, and waterbuck on the menu.
All
and
right.
I'm taking my 375 Model 70 and kind of trying to figure out what ammo to take. Do I take the 300 grain bear claws? I have a lifetime supply of them. Or do I try to get something a little lighter and flatter shooting? So that is kind of where I am right now.
Well, you have plenty of time to think about that, and I wish you nothing but the best of luck on that upcoming hunt, and I greatly appreciate you coming on the show and sharing the story of your leopard hunt with us today, Joe.
Hey, John, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. Like I said, hair-raising tale. Fortunately, it did have a happy ending, and his hunt ended on a much better note than it started out with, especially getting sick and everything before he even made it over to Africa. Links to some of my other leopard hunting episodes with Kevin Robertson, Phil Macero, and Gavin Lippies are in the show notes. That's episodes 293, 158, and 154. Check them out. All three are outstanding. Now, this hunt with Joe is a really good example of how it's so important to always be ready on your hunt. Things can change on a dime. Doesn't matter how slow things are going right now. They can change on a dime, and it's up to you to take advantage of those opportunities when they come your way. Now, having the right gear is important, like a flashlight in this particular case. Luckily, he had one, even though it might not have been the flashlight he wished he had. That's still better than not having a flashlight. But even more important than gear, it's also important to be mentally prepared for things to happen. It's a long trip over to Africa from the United States. Sometimes it takes just a day or two to, quote unquote, get in the groove of things after you get there. But at the same time, most people don't go on hunts like this very often. A person that goes every year or every other year is hunting in Africa a lot. And some people, if they are lucky, get to go on a hunt like this one time in their life. For that reason, it's even more important to make every single day that you are in Africa count. One, to just enjoy it and appreciate it and soak up those experiences so you can treasure those memories later on down the road. But at the same time, too, you might get an opportunity at the animal of a lifetime on day 1 or day 2 or day 3 of your hunt. And if you're still kind of stuck back in your regular job or your life at home or something like that, haven't fully made the trip to Africa in your mind yet, well, you might not get another opportunity like that on a hunt if you screw it up or pass on it. People always talk about, quote unquote, taking what the bush gives you on a hunt in Africa. Ordinarily, people are referring to chasing something like an impala or a warthog or a wildebeest or something, and then they get a shot on some other animal they did not even consider hunting at the time. They get a shot at a giant kudu or a waterbuck or something like that. Sometimes you're like Joe and you're on the trail of sable and you unexpectedly get a crack at a monster leopard like they did, right? He gets there, nothing is hitting any of the initial baits that they hit. Then they go check this other bait a little bit out of the way after they chase those sable for a little bit. And then, oh my gosh, a leopard hit this bait last night. We're staying here the rest of the day, and we're going to sit here until we kill this leopard or until it gets dark. A story like that is not uncommon on a hunt in Africa. And so it is incumbent upon you to make the most out of that opportunity when it arrives. Now, anyone that has served in the Army recently is familiar, I'm sure, with the term PCCs and PCIs, your pre-combat checks and your pre-combat inspections, where the leadership of a unit goes through and inspects all the vehicles and all the individual soldiers and everything before a mission to ensure that everyone has all the gear that they need to go on that mission, that it's all in good working order, everyone knows what their job is, all of those things. Well, those sort of things apply on a hunt as well. Do you have your flashlight? Do you have the chairs? Do you have the Leopard tracking kit? Those things that you need for a hunt. If you get an unexpected opportunity at something, you might not have time to go back and get them. But this story is also an emphasis on the point of why it is so important to carry vital gear like that with you all the time, even if you don't think you are going to need it. It has been said that, especially in a leopard blind, that a comfortable client is a quiet client. And that's what you need. You're going to be sitting there for hours. That leopard is going to arrive probably right before the sun goes down. You want that client and everyone else associated with it to be able to sit there comfortably, to be quiet, and be ready mentally to take that shot when it comes. And I know, right, we can all deal with a certain level of hardship and adversity out there and get by, but at a certain point, sucking it up and dealing with it makes things more difficult, and it takes away from your ability to successfully complete a task like making a good shot on a leopard under adverse conditions. Now, truth be told, I'm not sure how much of a difference those things would have made in this case by having the ideal chairs and the Leopard tracking kit, all of that, right? They had chairs, just not the chairs that they wanted, etc. And really, under those exact conditions that after the shot where the PH went and just saw the blood at the base of the tree, he might still have backed off and wanted to wait till morning, even if he would have had his perfect Leopard tracking kit and all of that stuff. But I can also see how having something like that nagging at you in the back of your mind, oh man, I wish I had a better chair, or, gosh, wish I had a better flashlight and whatnot, could potentially distract you and hamper your ability to make that shot when it counts. I'm not trying to sharpshoot anybody here or any of that stuff or try to be a Monday morning quarterback. But this is an example of there are little things that you can control that can tip the odds a little bit in your favor. And when possible, I like to do those things. Keep those things in mind. Like Joe mentioned, he shot this leopard with a Winchester Model 70 in 375 H&H. He had a Swaro Z6i scope on it. That's a great rifle, great scope for that sort of conditions. He was also shooting 300 grain trophy bonded bear claw bullets. Those are really good bullets, and I wouldn't say they're necessarily the gold standard for hunting over there, but they are a very highly regarded bullet for hunting in Africa. Usually most people have great experiences with them. Fernando actually brought them for his 375 on our podcast hunt last year, and he killed his buffalo with them and a couple of other animals. Basically, everything that he killed with his 375, he used those trophy bonded bear claw bullets. They worked great. Now, the reputation that those bullets have in Africa is primarily a function of how effective they are on thick-skinned, dangerous game, namely Cape buffalo. The trophy bonded bear claw is a pretty tough bullet. It has a solid rear shank and a bonded front core that will open up, but not to an excessive amount. So it does open, it does make a pretty wide wound cavity, but it also penetrates really well. That is great when you are hunting buffalo. But in this case, I would say that the trophy bonded bear claw is a bullet that is close to ideal for buffalo, but it will also work on leopard, but is not ideal for use on something like leopard. Now, even though this may not be a quote-unquote ideal bullet for leopard, that's not to say it won't work or that you should not use it. Especially if you have a situation, say like Joe had here, where these bullets shot great in his rifle. He had a bunch of them already. He was familiar with them. He was confident in them. Those are all important factors to keep in mind that argue in favor of using those bullets on a hunt like this. Plus, it also just simplifies things a little bit as well. You can carry those bullets in your rifle and hunt anything that you would reasonably hunt with a 375 with those bullets if you encounter it on a hunt over there. So say for instance, you're carrying around this 375 in the truck, checking the leopard baits, and that's what you have with you and are going to use if you find a bait that has been hit recently and you're going to stay there and hunt that leopard until nightfall that night. But by the same token, if you're out there checking leopard baits and you bump into a real nice Cape buffalo, I would use those bullets without hesitation on the buffalo. And plus, in this case, you also only have to take one bullet type over there for the 375 as well when you have space and weight limitations for your ammo. But to play devil's advocate here, I can't help but wonder how often hunters run into problems on leopards in particular because of their bullet choice. Those tougher bullets kill leopards, no doubt about it, especially with good shot placement. In fact, I almost wonder if there are more leopard killed with premium bullets like the Bear Claw, the Barnes, the Swift A-frame than anything else, simply because hunters are conditioned to want to use a bullet like that to hunt in Africa, usually because most people that are hunting with a 375 in Africa, for instance, are hunting game like Cape buffalo, and then that is a wonderful choice for it. But at the same time, using a bullet like that might be handicapping you, especially if you have a borderline or a marginal shot like Joe experienced here with this leopard. Now, like I keep saying, there's a time and a place where those tougher bullets are ideal, like on buffalo. But there's also a time and a place where you actually want something softer that will expand more, make a larger wound cavity in the animal at the expense of not penetrating as deep. Now, I am speaking from the perspective of someone who has never actually killed a leopard. But Kevin Robertson, who has done this a time or two, agrees with me here on this point. He really likes something like a Nosler Partition or a Nosler Accubon that will really expand and cause lots of damage on a leopard out of a 375, but also out of other cartridges as well. A softer bullet will not penetrate quite as well as a Barnes or a Trophy Bonded Bear Claw or a Swift A-frame, but penetration isn't usually an issue on a cat. Remember, these are not very big animals. A 200-pound leopard is absolutely gigantic, and plus they're very thin-skinned animals as well. For that reason, something like a plain old soft point from PPU or a company like that out of a 9.3 or out of a 375 might even be the best option here. Similar deal if you're using a smaller caliber cartridge like a 30-06 or a 300 Win Mag on leopard. And I could see something like a heavy for caliber Nosler ballistic tip or another similar but softer bullet like that being ideal too, where it would deliver massive expansion but still penetrate really well and not only reach the vitals and wreck the vitals, but probably still exit out the opposite side as well. Something like that will cause a wider wound track than a tougher bullet might make the difference on a borderline shot. Now, like I said, I'm not trying to sharpshoot anyone here, and like I said earlier, I can definitely understand the reasons why someone might want to use a different bullet. But just think about this as food for thought. I am a big proponent of good quality bullets, but I think a leopard hunt like this one is one of those times where a softer bullet makes more sense than a tougher bullet. Next, Joe's hunt is a good example of the importance of travel insurance and medical evacuation insurance. With regards to travel insurance, sometimes things happen and you can't go, like if you get sick right before you depart. But if you insure your trip and something like that happens that prevents you from going on your trip, then you can get reimbursement from the insurance company for non-refundable costs, like your deposit and your plane ticket. Ideally, yes, we would prefer to actually go on the hunt, but not going on the hunt and getting some or all of your money back is a lot better than not going on the hunt and losing all of that money. With regards to medical evacuation insurance, sometimes things happen on the hunt too. Sometimes you get sick, sometimes you get injured. Sometimes it's directly related to the hunt, sometimes it's something more banal like a car accident. But in the event that you have a serious medical issue overseas, a company like Global Rescue can help get you home without requiring that you pay ridiculous out-of-pocket expenses. And their policies are specifically designed with hunters in mind. I personally get medical evacuation insurance and travel insurance for myself every time I go to hunt in Africa through Global Rescue. I highly recommend that you do so as well. You likely won't need either one, but you will be really glad you had them if you run into an emergency. There is an affiliate link in the show notes where you can get both travel insurance and medical evacuation insurance from Global Rescue for an upcoming trip. Check that out and get a quote. It's probably going to cost a whole lot less than what you think it will. Okay, that will do it for this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you sign up for my email list. To do that, click the link in the show notes or go to huntingguns101.com. Sign up there for my free ebook on the best hunting calibers. Not only will you get that free ebook when you sign up, but you'll also start to receive the emails I send out every weekday. If you like the podcast, especially episodes like this one, you will love those emails. So make sure you are getting them too by going to huntingguns101.com. Remember, you can make your dream hunt turn into a reality, and we can help. Thanks for listening. I'll see you back here next time on the Big Game Hunting Podcast.
This show may be over, but we have plenty more for you on our website. For more information on today's topic, as well as lots of other useful hunting resources, head over to the BigGameHuntingBlog.com. We look forward to having you back for the next episode. But until then, happy hunting.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds.
Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous 2-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month.
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes per details.